So one of the new things in SharePoint 2013 is SharePoint added the functionality of a REST API. So this is just another channel into the data for SharePoint. So it's still calling the client.service web service, but this time it just has a different interface on it that supports REST, which is representational state transfer service. So basically the SharePoint WCF service has a new channel, and it's a REST channel. And there's two different ways you can get data back from the REST API. And the first one is, the default is Atom, which is an XML feed-based data. The second one is JSON. So JSON it's a lot sparser, so it's going to be a lot more efficient over the wire. It takes up a lot less space, and it's going to be a lot faster. The main thing to remember about REST is that it's just HTTP based. So why that's so important is that you can call the REST API. It doesn't matter what platform you're on. If you're on Windows, if you're on Apache or whatever, it doesn't matter if you're in developing for PHP or Android or iOS. This is just another way of opening up the SharePoint data to all these different types of devices and OSs and systems. So basically any client that supports standard REST and standard Open Data Protocol syntax is going to be able to use the REST API. And again, it's using the SharePoint Web Service endpoint as the client-side object model, which is the client.svc endpoint. It's just based on the headers that come in, it knows how to handle REST requests. And another thing to make it look more like a standard REST API is that you can use the _API alias instead of using _VTI bin / client service. So kind of like the conventions that the ASP.NET Web API uses as well. So it's nice, there's some consistency there. Let's just take a quick comparison here. So if I want to get a list by its title, I would use the list object called getByTitle, pass in the list name. For REST, pretty similar. So I'd have my URL and then whatever site I'm in, and then just _API and then /lists. That tells the REST service it's going to be a lists, that's the resource. And then we're going to call getByTitle, can pass in the name. So the nice thing is we can just do that all in one URL request, one HTTP request, and then get back the data. So in this demo, we're going to take a look at using the REST API and retrieving data out of our SharePoint 2013 site. Okay, so let's demonstrate getting some data out of our SharePoint site. I'm going to just open up a new tab here. And let's put in our alias to the endpoint, _API. And let's call getByTitle. And I'll pass in vendors. And what I'm going to do here, that did work. We just need to view it a different way. So let's open up Fiddler. So Fiddler is a really nice tool to use if you're dealing with web services at all, or when you're making AJAX calls from JavaScript, it's great to use Fiddler because you can see exactly what goes over the wire. So I'm going to go ahead and let's just delete this session. So we'll refresh. Let's close that. Let's go ahead and refresh this request and come back into Fiddler, and then we can take a look at what we got. And we can go ahead and parse it with HTML. And you can see we have one entry that came back. And it's basically showing all the content types of the list. I'm sorry, not the content types, the properties of the list. And here's our list that we asked for. So that might not be so interesting. Probably what we wanted to see was getting the items in the list. So that's pretty easy too. In fact, we can go to the composer here, and I can drag this in here. Actually, that's not going to work because of the authentication. So let's just go back to here. We'll go back to our web. So if I just want to see the items, it's pretty simple. I just go /items, open, close parent, pass that in, and now remember the default is an Atom feed. It's using the Atom format, so this Internet Explorer thinks you're subscribing to a feed. So let's open it up in Fiddler again. And see, here's the feed element. So we have 4 entries. And then we have here's our content. So you can see here's the title. Here's the full name field, primary number field. And let's go back up to, if we look at the request, let's look at the raw request. You can see here's our get, and we're telling it application XML. Now if we told it to that we wanted JSON, then it would bring JSON back as well. Okay, so what if we didn't want all the items, we only wanted maybe one of the items? Well, we can do that too. So let's come back here, and we could actually just put in the number 1 here. Let's come back and look at what came back. You can see we got 1 entry back. We just got the first one. And so that was this first record that we were just looking at. But if we look at the XML, there's only 1 entry element coming back. We said we just wanted the first one. Now what we can do also is, after we have that, we can say field values as HTML. So if you had HTML inside of a field, you could return the HTML. So you can see right here, you can see how it's escaped because we said field values is HTML, and so that apostrophe is escaped right now because we said field values is XML. So what we looked at is just some of the ways how the REST API works in SharePoint and how easy it is to use, and also using a tool like Fiddler helps us to analyze exactly what's going across the wire. So the purpose of the Open Data Protocol, we're going to call it OData, is to provide a REST-based protocol for CRUD-style operations, meaning create, read, update, and delete. against resources that are exposed as data services. So data service is just an endpoint where there's data exposed from one or more collections, and then each with 0 or more entries, which consist of type named value pairs. So OData is published by Microsoft under the Open Specification Promise. So basically anybody can build out an implementation of it. And it's very useful when querying against lists because it gives us a lot of different types of functionality that normally would be code that we would have to write. So some of the things that OData protocol supports, which this is just a very, very small subset. OData actually has lots and lots of different filters. It supports math functions, but some of the things that I think are real useful right away for SharePoint developers are being able to retrieve specific columns from a list, just doing simple filters. There's lots of different comparison operators, so in this case we're using equals. You can even do joins with lookup fields, and of course sorting is supported. Just use the order by keyword and then tell it what field name. Now, one thing that you do have to keep in mind is that the REST and OData commands are all case insensitive, but anytime you refer to a field in a list in SharePoint, those are case sensitive. So let's take a look at using the REST API with OData to retrieve data from SharePoint lists. We have our team site open up again, and I'm going to go to the products list because we're going to do some queries against this list. So what I'm going to do is just open up a new browsing tab, and I have a query set here already to get products. And notice how we're going to use the OData keyword here, select, and we only want the title and quantity fields to come back. So I'm going to paste this in, and I have Fiddler running. Let me just go ahead and remove all these sessions and then refresh that. Okay, looks like we have an error, so that's interesting. Okay, I see what I did wrong. We need to, forgot to put in the query string for the request, so let's try that again. Nice though, we got a nice XML error. Okay, so now let's go into Fiddler and see our response. Go to the content, and you can see here for the properties being returned, we're only getting title and quantity back now. So here's the second entry in the list, third entry, fourth entry, fifth entry, sixth entry, just title and quantity coming back. So now let's go ahead and let's do a filter. So let's say, let's pick one of these values. Well, let's just go to the SharePoint site, pick one of the values. Let's say that we want the title to equal megatongs. So let's try that. So we'll just modify our query here. We'll just say and filter equals, and then we'll say title equal tongs, I think that was the name of it. Megatongs, okay. Let's copy that. Let's paste that in here. And let's check to see what we got back. Looks like it was correct because we only got one result back, and that's what we wanted. And sure enough, there's our one result. We're able to do quite a bit without much code at all. A one-liner basically gave us back the exact item that we wanted in this list. So now let's change that a little bit, and let's take the filter off. And this time, let's just do a sort. So we'll do order by title. And you can order by multiple fields. So I could just put a comma in here and put the next field that I wanted to order by, just like SQL. Well, not just like SQL, but it allows sorting on multiple columns. So now if we look at our results, so we should see, if we sort by title here, flower basket should be the first one. Flower basket and fruit basket. So let's go into Fiddler and see which the first one. Now we have giant spring, giant magnet, megatongs. Looks like flower basket was the last one. Let's check our request. Let's run this again. Make sure we have our query correct. So select equals title. Oh, okay. Well, that should be fine. We want title and quantity coming back, and we want to order by. We didn't actually do this correctly. So we forgot the $sign. So the order by was never executed. So let's try that again. And let's come in Fiddler. So this time, flower basket should be the first item. Let's see if it is. It is. Now we're sorting. So we just forgot the, we didn't specify the order by clause, the order by filter correctly, or the order by keyword. Needs to have the $sign in front of it. And these are all sorted correctly now. Let's see what the last one is. Alma Flipper. That looks correct. This is just a small intro into using OData with SharePoint, but there's a lot more you can do with this. But as you can see, it really does help eliminate a lot of code. So even though you're on a Windows platform, and if you decide maybe you don't want to use the client object model library, you just want to make a couple simple HTTP requests, you could use REST and OData to do that if you want. Or if you're if you're developing an Android app going against SharePoint or an iOS app, then this is something that you'll definitely want to use, because it definitely saves a lot of coding time. If we were just to do our regular server-side code against the object model, we would actually have a lot of code here, a lot more than just one line of a URL to get back the data that we're getting here. So overall, I think this is a major improvement in SharePoint, in my opinion.